So my name is Evan Robbins, and today I'm interviewing my grandfather, and we are at his daughter's home in Norwalk, Connecticut, and it is November 25th, 2015. So could you please state your name
Ivor Roslin Jr.
and what war are you a veteran of?
World War II.
What branch, or what was your rank?
And rank, I spent a year and 22 days as an enlisted man, and then went to officer candidate school and became a second lieutenant. And from there, while over in Europe, I was advanced to first lieutenant, and when I left the service, I was a captain. And this was in the field artillery of the Army.
So when did you serve your active duty overseas?
Overseas, we left the United States on April the 6th, and I got back, that was April the 6th, 1944, and I got back home August the 26th, 1945.
All right.
That's the time that I, in between, spent in England, then crossed into France and all the way to Germany and what have you.
You can talk.
Now, one of the things was that after being over there and the war was over in Europe, I was transferred from my outfit, which was the 270th Field Artillery Battalion, to another 558 Field Artillery Battalion, and we went down to Marseille. We moved all the way down to Marseille, and we got aboard ship to go to Japan. Japan hadn't surrendered yet. Fortunately, 2 days after we left Marseille on a boat, Japan did surrender. And boy, I always remember hearing the, I've said this many times, on the ship they would say, now hear this, we just received orders to change our course and we'll be in New York City in 10 days. You never saw so many bottles of liquor come out of the bedrolls in your life. So I did get home August the 26th.
So Grandpa, we didn't cover the day you were born.
I was born January 28th, 1919, in a little house on High Street in Locust Valley, Long Island, New York. When I was 3 years old, which was 1922, we moved to Birch Street, which was about a block away. And in that house, I went to school, graduated in 1934 from Locust Valley School, and then went to Glen Cove for three years to high school, graduating in 1937.
So did you enlist in the Army, or were you drafted into the Army?
I was drafted. I drafted and entered the service on March 25th, 1942.
Is there anything in particular that you remember about the first day that you were in the service?
Well, yes, yes. I think the first day was you got off the train. Now there was a whole trainload of men at that time. In Roman, we had to swear allegiance to the United States. That's one. And I think it was another day. The day after that, you got your shots in the arm, right? You'd line up and you'd walk between 1 to 5 people going to give you a shot. This one would hit you on this arm, this guy over hit you here, and then he hit you over here, and you over here, for 5 of them. They,
Oh.
they immunized you for almost everything you could think of at that time.
Now, were you nervous, excited, scared, just overwhelmed?
I wasn't nervous. I certainly wasn't afraid. I was just, didn't know what was gonna happen, so just went along with the flow.
Nice. Now, at this time, did you have any immediate friends that you knew were joining at the same time?
Oh,
or-
yes. One fella, Paul Murray, from Glen Cove. We were pretty good friends, and from Camp I'll interject this anyway. From Camp Upton, he and I both were there at the same day, same time. We were sent down to Fort Jackson, and he was put in a different outfit than I was. So we lost track of ourselves for about 2 weeks. Then I find out there's only one barracks between his barracks and mine. Now this is Paul, my friend. And then when it came to go to OCS, we both went on the same train to both things, and we both became officers also. After that, he went one way and I went the other way. Well, that's my dad owned had two houses down in Babel, not directly on the beach, but one house off the beach, and we used to spend. Now this is way back in the 1930s, early 30s, and maybe late 20s. So I was only between 7 and 14 during that period. And of course, there were summer houses there, and every year the same kids came, so you got to be very friendly with them. And we used to take a rowboat with a little 5 horsepower motor on the back, and I swear that how the boat stayed afloat I'll never know, but we used to travel all the way around, going east, around Center Island, down into Oyster Bay Harbor, and then there was a big sandbank there. I'd run up and down the sandbank, and then when we were coming home, we would stop at this abandoned estate. They had all kinds of fruit. Boy, we'd help ourselves to buy pears and anything that was there. They'd come home. How we made it without any problem.
No life jackets.
No life jackets, no. Nobody heard about the life jackets. But that's how I grew up. You grew up, when we went down there, you get up in the morning, you put your bathing trunks on, and you took them off at night.
So Dad, tell us about the hurricane of 1938.
Well, that's just, as you know, I met your mother in 1938, and then I think it was somewhere around mid-September of 1938, they had the hurricane. They basically went throughout in West Hampton, out in the Hamptons, out east on the island. I picked your mother up in Glencoe, no, in Manhasset. And we drove all the way out there because my father owned a house out there. He used to build houses way out in West Hampton. He was in the building business. And he had bought an acre property and put a building on it. Well, a tree in the backyard came down and did something to his chimney, so he was out there fixing. So I went out there, actually, I took your mother to help him. But it was martial law, they wouldn't let us in. They wouldn't let us into the place. So there it was, I had to drive all the way back home again.
And didn't something happen to Uncle Ozzy's car?
Oh, yes. He lived down in Babel, and he had a basement in his house. It was only went down about 3 feet. So the first floor was maybe 6 feet above ground. So they were upstairs when the hurricane and it flooded the whole area there. So he put his car on the highest spot out in the front, and I think it was the next day, he called me to ask me to come down in my car, with my car, and pull him to get his car going. And when I got there, you could see the water line was right up to the windows in this car. Because needless to say, the car didn't run. Yeah.
And did they lose a fire truck also?
Not then.
Oh,
Another one, many years later, they did use a fire truck, yeah. Because that was the problem in Babel. Whenever the hurricanes came, the tide came in and would flow all the way down through town.
so Dad, tell us, how much did you make when you worked at the lumber yard? Was that your first job?
Yes, I graduated in 1937 from Glen Cove High School and immediately went to work for the lumberyard in Locust Valley. I worked 9 hours a day, 5.5 days a week, and I went home really with a lot of money, $18
For the whole week?
for the whole week, and I came home and I gave my mother $5 for board, if you want to call it.
Right, rent?
So what did I have? 5 out of 9, that's $14 from. But out of $14, I used to take your mother to New York City, to the Paramount, to the Roxy, to the Radio City,
That was
Madison Square Garden.
wow. And tell us about the story about why you wanted to buy a car and your father.
Well, I had met your mother, as you know, in June, the last Saturday in June of 1938. And I didn't have a car. And I wanted to see your mother, so I needed a car. And I went out and I picked out one. But my father talked me out of it because he said, I always remember him saying, if you buy a car, you own a car, you'll never save any money. So I believed him, and I think it was 2 or 3 weeks later I came back to him and says, Dad, I bought a car. Can I borrow $200 from you? And he gave me $200. So he borrowed it. I borrowed it. Believe me, I paid it back.
So tell us about the story about how you met Mom and what you felt when you first saw her. So how'd you meet her?
Well, a friend of mine by the name of Bob Fowle, which I grew up with, went to school with, he was invited to, this is in 1938, we both graduated from high school in 1937. Well, he was invited to a girl's birthday party in Glen Cove. And as I recall him telling me that he said, yes, he'd come, but he'd have to bring somebody, one of his friends with him, so he'd know somebody there. Well, he asked me. And we went in and this was the second floor of this apartment building, and when I opened the door, there were 3 girls sitting on the couch, and your mother was sitting in the middle. And as I said before, that was it. That was it.
Love at first sight.
That's right.
And how old was Mom then?
Well, you really wanted me to tell you she was 15 years old. She looked like she was 18, 19, which I was 19. But she was 15 years old.
So Mom, tell us about your grandfather sleigh bells. Where are the sleigh bells from?
My grandfather did what, dear?
Where did the sleigh bells come from? Whose sleigh bells are they?
I don't know. I guess it was my mother's, my father's,
She's not gonna
my
remember.
father's,
Your grandfather's.
my grandfather.
Did you go on the horse-drawn sleigh? With Aunt Norma?
Mm-hmm.
Did he have a farm?
Hmm?
Did grandfather have a farm?
No,
No?
no farm.
Okay.
He had chickens. He raised chickens. And the chickens used to follow him all around the yard. They were pretty smart. They knew they were going to be fed.
What happened to the chicken that bit you? Your grandfather, right? He said no more chicken.
Oh, but these sleigh bells. Oh.
They're very old.
My mother used to dress me up because it was cold, and my grandfather would put this on the sleigh, and away we would go all through Manhattan.
That was nice.
Oh,
So, tell us how you met Dad. How did you meet Ivor?
oh, I have a fairy godmother, and I said, now you go over there in Locust Valley and get me this man. And I described her to her, and she brought it back to me.
Did you meet him at a party? Whose party was it? Who had the party?
Gee, there was so many people there, I don't remember whose party it was.
Okay.
Oh, dear.
How old were you when you got married, Mom? How old were you when you got
When
married?
I got married, well, now, I never tell people my age.
Come on, tell her how old you were.
How old were you?
When I got married,
Yeah. How old? 21?
how old would I have been?
No, you were just short of 21. You were 20 years in September. If you had Thanksgiving, you would have been 21. Yeah, come on.
Okay.
Just short of 21.
Mom, when you graduated from school, you took a job. You got a job. How did you decide which job to take? What were the jobs you had?
There weren't that many jobs available, Cindy. But my father and mother were well known in Manhasset. And the president of the bank called my father and he said, I have a job open. Is Ruth interested? So I went down, saw him. And then I was talking to some woman there and she said, you should apply to the telephone company. She said they pay much better than the bank, probably about 50 cents. But that's how I got there. Anyway.
So which job did you take? Where did you go?
Work.
Where did you work? Which job?
Where did I work?
Yeah, which one did you go to?
Oh, I went with telephone company. They paid the best. And I really enjoyed that job. I really did. I became chief operator and
How did you connect people? How did the phones work? How did you do it? A
Show
board?
them what you did.
Tell us about the board.
Show them what you did, honey. When a call came in, if you called and wanted to call somebody, what would you do? You would answer number, please, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you would plug it in over there, right? That's correct.
And do you remember the story about the bookie?
yeah, oh, this is something. had some bookies in Manhasset, and they were right across the street from the telephone company. And they thought they were getting extra special treatment. They weren't getting any special treatment, but they used to send us ice cream over every night. And I can't let anyone in the building. So I said to him, you tell me when you're gonna send the ice cream and I'll send one of my girls down. So they did. We had more ice cream than we could eat. Oh dear. It was a fun job.
And what about walking to the phone company when the blackouts? When they had the blackouts, it was very dark.
Oh, that's right.
Tell us about that. What?
Tell them who took you down there. Who walked you to work?
Who took me to work?
Yeah,
My aunt. My aunt took me to work.
no,
Yes. Oh, I
In
thought you
Manhasset,
meant for
no.
the interview.
no. When you went to work during the war, when you had no street lights or anything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who took you to work?
My father.
Your father, father.
It was, there were no lights because the blackouts for
Right.
the war, in case of bombing,
Yeah.
right?
And when I worked as chief operator, my father would never let me walk home. And he had a special name for what they did, checking to see if the lights were around houses and things like that. And it worked out fine. So I just sit there. It was a course from the fire department. I just sit there until my dad came, and he'd come and get me and walk me home.
And what happened to the board when the war was over?
What happened to the telephone?
To the board, how did you know the war was over?
How did I know? Oh, the women were screaming and yelling. The war was over. And people saying, I waited 2 minutes to get the operator. I said, the war's over. Oh, that's all right, she said.
What happened to the board though?
The board lit up like a Christmas tree. They couldn't possibly take care of them, you know.
Right.
But there is always a rating there. The police come first, then the fire department, and then the supervisor on the floor. And it worked out very well. It was an interesting job. I liked that. When I left, because I was going to have the baby, and they made me promise I'd come back. And I said, no, I'm going home to take care of this baby. But I did miss him. But we had a lot of fun. A lot of ice cream. Oh dear.
So this is going back a little ways. When you were a little girl, what did your mother always make you wear in your hair?
And then,
In your hair?
oh, a bow.
Was it a little bow?
Sometimes a little one, sometimes a big one.
It was pretty big when I remember, right?
My mother loved bows. Oh dear God, love her.
Yeah.
What else?
But my father's family was a real old family in Manhasset, and everyone knew him. So if I wanted a job, my father take care of it. But I didn't want a job. I had a job.
And someone in your family was a sheriff. Who was that?
She was
A sheriff.
a sheriff. That was my grandfather. He was the first sheriff. I have the papers and everything. And I said to my mother, how could Grandpa be a sheriff? He's so kind. And my mother said, well, when they get drunk, he goes in there and he tells them, have another drink. And then he says, that's it, arrest you. Oh, when I think about it, it was so different in those days.
How many times a week did Dad come visit you?
5 times a day.
Now,
How many times did you come?
Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday afternoon and night, and on Wednesday night.
And my father was very strict. If the homework wasn't done, I didn't go out. So,
Wait a minute now, you were not allowed to go out on school days and evenings, so I'd come over and I'd help you with your bookkeeping and homework. 2 or 3 hours.
Oh,
And sit at
dear.
the kitchen table.
So Dad, how long have you and Mom been married?
66 years, 67.
72.
Oh, yeah, but I'm thinking of the house, I'm sorry. 66 is the house we've been living in, sorry. That's 72 years, 72 years. We married in 1943, September the 5th.
And you knew each other 4 years before that.
5 years.
5 years.
5 years.
So you've known each other for 77 years.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, but Ivor was in the service for a long time during that period.
Right, well, for a while. Yeah.
How long were you in the service, dear?
A little less, let's see, I got out in January and March, February, March. 2 months less, short or less than 4 years. Almost 4 years.
Almost.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tell us about your train ride from Fort Bragg. Do you remember taking?
Ivor, we were down in Fort Bragg. Ivor was going overseas and I had to get home. So I went down to where they sell the tickets and he said, no, we're not selling any tickets. You have to be in the service. So I said, oh, that's terrible. I said, here I am expecting a baby and I have to stay here until I can get a ticket. I wasn't pregnant or anything. So he calls his friend Harry over and he says to Harry, you know your friend Ruthie has to get home. He said, yes, that's right, she's expecting a baby. I got on that train. Oh dear.
And did the servicemen, they gave you, what, donuts?
Mm.
The servicemen on the train, did they give you donuts? What?
Yeah. The different places they'd have donuts set up, you know, so that for the servicemen. So they'd go out there and they'd put an extra donut in their pocket and bring it home to me. Oh dear.
Can I interject? To clarify this was that we got married in September of 43. Now when being married, we were only together for 2 weeks after married, and then Ruth went home because I was taking tests. We were out in the field almost every night, and you know, things like that. But in January, for the month of February and March, Ruth came down and we lived together with a man and a woman called Harry and Louise Johnson. Now, it was they had owned the house, but they rented out one of the bedrooms. And I went down to make arrangements to there. And he, I guess, accepted my looks, the way I talked, but he said, okay. But he gave me rules and regulations. Your mother was only gonna have kitchen privileges and lunch privilege. Dinner, she would have to go out, or we would have to go out. Because they both worked in camp in Fort Bragg. Well, your mother came down on a Saturday. I met her at the train. We went up and sat down in the living room with Harry and Louise, getting acquainted, more acquainted than we might say, and went to bed that night. Well, the next morning, they bang on the door, come on out and have breakfast with us. Now, this is the people we were renting the place from. And from then on, they shared their ration tickets with was it Harry or Louise's mother, or a family owned a farm, and we would ride out to the farm with them. Every morning they rode me, took me into camp because they both worked in it. Worked out beautifully, beautiful.
We had fresh eggs every day.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Mom, so when you and Dad got married, what about the gas for people's cars? How did that work?
why? What do you mean?
People didn't have a lot of gas for their
No.
cars, right? So how did you do that? How did that work? How did people get gas for their cars?
A gas ration, honey.
Gee, yeah. I just went down for an interview, see?
Oh, right.
Yeah.
But for your wedding, did people have to save their gas ration tickets so they could come drive to the wedding, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Do you remember in the Depression, the bread lines? Do you remember the bread lines?
Yes, I sure do.
Tell us about that.
You know, the people didn't have any money to buy food, and the little bit that they had, they bought mostly bread because that was so stable. And you could see them waiting by the hour to get that loaf of bread.
And what did the Whitneys do?
Hmm.
The Whitneys. The Whitney family, what did the Whitneys do?
The big estate.
The big estate, what did they do? What did they bring? Milk? What did they, from their farm, the Whitneys?
Yes, the Whitneys. The Whitneys were multi-millionaires, and they would take very good care of us. And we could walk all over their estate as long as you didn't touch anything or break anything. And they made sure you didn't, because the supervisor there walked around. And he was a pretty strong man. I wouldn't want to tangle with him.
And what did they do at the pond? You used to go ice skating?
Yes. He had a pond on his estate, the Whitney estate, and we could go ice skating. But we couldn't go ice skating until he had several men from his estate go out there and make sure that ice was safe for us. And then he'd have his men bring hot chocolate down so we could have hot chocolate.
And they used to have big parties.
Oh yes, they used to have big parties, and they'd all come out on the train because from New York and such, because gas was rationed and so forth. And we used to all go down, a bunch of kids of us, and they said we could stay there as long as we didn't get in the way. I mean, we saw every movie star, I think, that ever stepped in a pair of shoes.
This is what these big estates used to have, coming out parties. That's when a daughter turned 18, they would have a tremendous party. Well, my father worked or built a dance platform in sections for a caterer. And he used to put this dance class up, and they would put a tent over it with 3 main posts that big, so it was 100 feet by 50 feet. This is a dance platform. And he used to, as kids, I shouldn't say kids, we were young 13, 14 years old or 12. My dad would take us out, and these sections, we'd have to carry our load by carrying one corner of this 14-foot by 4-foot section, put it together. But that's what they had coming out parties, yeah.
And Dad, was it when you were putting together one of those floors that you had your first beer?
Oh, yeah, that was down in Glen Cove. My dad used to, when the platform was up, or the dance platform, we would wax it. And he put, that's what us kids, my brother and I would do. We would had a machine to wax it. Well, on one of them there, it was hot, and it was the first can of beer I drank. I'm telling you, that was going round. Yeah. I was very fortunate in my timing. I don't know if I've told this before to you folks, but I came home on a 7-day, as an enlistment, came home on a 7-day furlough. And about halfway through that week, in my mind it came to me that I usually served guard duty every so many days, and that was on Sunday. That would be the Sunday which I would be coming back on. I played a hunch and went back a day early, and sure enough I was on guard duty. And while on guard duty, I was called down to be interviewed by 3 officers for possibly going to OCS, Officer Candidate State School. And they picked me as others also, and I think it was a week later, I was on a train headed for
Fort Bragg?
Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And there I went through Officer Candidate School, coming out as a 2nd lieutenant. And I was assigned there to the 270th Field Artillery, which was a new outfit, and most of the enlisted men came from down around New Orleans or whatnot. So we even had to have an English class. Some of them couldn't only speak
Creole.
or whatever they talk down there. I've said many times that the good Lord was watching out for me because, and the best thing is that this was on November the 15th. I forget exactly where we were in Germany. No, it wasn't in Germany, yes. It was just north of the city of Metz in France. John Hummer, our battalion assistant S2, went out as a forward observer with the lead infantry group, and he was killed. Another officer took his place for 2 days, and then I went down and took that man's place 2 days, and I was with the infantry when they went into the city of Metz. And I always remember there was all kinds of firing going on, and I asked the captain of the infantry outfit, that company I was with, I said, excuse my language, what the hell am I doing here? I can't direct artillery in the streets of a city. So he released me. And I went back to the outfit. Now my commanding officer, Colonel Gabriel by name, he called me in and he moved me from a battery reconnaissance officer up to take the place of the person that was killed. Now while I was, before that, all the way across France, I was Charlie battery, C batteries, a reconnaissance officer. And my duty was to fly in a little Piper Cub with a pilot to direct the artillery firing. And I did that all the way across France, all the way across. And when John Hummer was this, and I moved, he was killed, and I moved up to take his place, I didn't fly anymore. And on New Year's Day, 1945, the pilot I always flew with, and the officer that took my place was shot down and both killed. If certain John Hummer hadn't died, I would have been in that plane.
So let's talk a little bit more about your experience overseas in World War II.
Well, when we left the United States, as I said before, and then landed in Greenock, Scotland. And from there we went down to Wales, where there was a tent camp. We lived in tents for about a week or 10 days. Then we moved over to another camp halfway between Coventry and Birmingham, in England. I went back out to Wales. We had some schooling on aerial observation out there for, I think it was 4 or 5 days. And then on about 6 weeks after D-Day, when I say we, I'm talking about the outfit, 270. We crossed over and landed on Utah Beach, which was one of the D-Day landing points, and went into bivouac as part of the Third Army. And then when they the Third Army broke out of the containment there, or the bridgehead, and we went south, then turned east, and tried to close up a gap to capture a whole army, I'd say whole army, but a lot of men. But they failed, and a lot of them got away. Then from then, we just raced across northern France. Until they had to stop. They had to stop because the logistics where they couldn't get the supplies, ammunition up that far from the beachhead all the way up there. So you had to stop and bring everything up.
Kind of
This is
resupply.
what they do, yeah. But every night you could hear machine guns going off in the distance there. Every once in a while, an artillery shell would go by. Not ours, but the enemy.
Yeah. So, when you weren't, I guess, advancing, what was an average day?
Well, if you advance, you get up and have breakfast in the morning, load up in your vehicle, and the whole outfit would move forward and stop at nighttime and camp there for sleep on the ground in your little pup tent. That's what you would do. I had a Jeep, a driver, and a radio operator, which I rode in. As I said, that was it. Yeah. Sometimes we went into position, and I would have to fly in the Piper Cub to direct firing. Now, when they direct firing, remember now, you're sitting up in the air, and you're looking out over the enemy lines, and if you have a target to fire on, you'd have to, actually what you would say, you'd watch the target, and you'd see something land over here. You'd say 200 right, and they would move it left, and then they'd fire again. You'd say 50 over, and they would shorten it up, and then you'd say fire for effect. That meant you were on target. So they were depending on me and another officer also. There were 2 of us that flew in 2 different Cubs. They were depending on us to actually hit the targets that they were assigned.
So you actually moved with the outfit. You weren't stationed elsewhere, and then
No,
flew
moved with the
in.
outfit. move with the, I've been sent out and established a observation point. And it was, let's say, a big open area, and in the middle of the area, it rose up a little bit, and it was a clump of trees up there. And that's where they were observing the enemy area, right? Well, I was sent up there the second night or the third night that somebody else had been there. And when I went up there, he told me that morning they had seen a 9-man German patrol walk by on the other side of the hill. Oh boy, so believe me, that night we did not sleep.
So they were real
And
close then?
but believe it or not, the next morning, I hear a plane coming by, and here was a German pilot. He couldn't have been 200 feet off the ground. He was a blonde-haired guy, right out in the front of us, right out in the front of us. Where he went, I don't know. And you do funny things, strange things. One other place we were in, there was 3 or 4 of us officers were on the edge of these woods talking. And behind us, there was an open area and then a hill. And up over this hill comes this German plane. And then you could see the guns firing, all right? Everybody else ran into the woods. I run up the thing because it looked like he was going to crash right where I was. But believe it or not, I don't know why but that German pilot ejected, and we took him prisoner. Yeah.
Maybe he was gonna crash.
Huh?
Maybe he was gonna crash.
The plane crashed, I'm sure, a little bit in some way, but yeah, he didn't go. Yeah. Somewhere around Thanksgiving, I think it was that year, 44, we were in a town, and we had taken over the mayor's place, the offices and whatnot. It had 2-story. We were having the movies, and one of our own planes happened to pull the wrong thing and dropped a 500-pound bomb outside of town. Boy, I'll tell you, that scared the hell out of us.
Shook the whole place?
It did. It did, yeah. But I've been asked, well, you're afraid. It's funny, I can't remember ever being deathly afraid. Because when, as I said, I was a forward observer after John Hummer was killed. You have to understand what the infantry, boy, I'm telling you, I'm glad I went in the infantry. We slept in the barn that night with the captain of the infantry and left the next morning. It's pitch black. And they stand out, 3 men out in the front. They're point men. And maybe 100 yards, 50 or 75 yards behind them, the rest of the troop comes in line on each side of the road. Here's the captain, I'm right behind him, not up at the point. And this is where we were advancing on the city of Metz, and it was one of their Siegfried, no, not Siegfried, but the Maginot Forts. Maybe you've heard of them from World War I that they built. Well, all of a sudden, all hell broke loose. The enemy started firing on us. And we moved off and crossed around. I had to step over one of our own men that was killed. And later on, a German went up to it. That was still too. So that was my actual experience, and really could have been shot with a.
Yeah. So, did you ever take over a part of a town or a building?
Oh yes, sure. It was cold in the wintertime, so we would take it over the mayor's place or anything else like that. Now, all right, when the U.S. troops or the Allied troops crossed the Rhine River, Before that, I should back up and say that my outfit was an artillery outfit, and we had the largest piece of artillery that they had made. 240 millimeter howitzer.
Wow.
The projectile, the part that was shot out, weighed 300 pounds, and it took 80 pounds of pressure to put powder to push it out. Full range, which would be about 17 miles. And if you were underneath of it out there, when it went overhead, it sounded like a freight train go by.
Wow.
It really did. But when they passed over, they didn't need us because our troops were running anywhere they wanted in Germany. There was no opposition. They put our outfit in to taking care of prisoner wars. And we moved from one camp, prisoner war, just north of Frankfurt. That's where I crossed the Rhine. We were Frankfurt on Rhine, yeah. It's on the Rhine River, right just west of Frankfurt. From there we moved up to another one, and there, when we was there, that's when we saw one of those concentration camps. The bodies of some of them that couldn't move had been shot and still laying in the courtyard. From there we moved down to Fürth, which is down further south in Germany, then down into Regensburg, and from Regensburg halfway through Munich, between Munich and Salzburg. And in each camp we would take over a building and pick out in the prisoners. I used to have them shave you, cut your hair, shine your boots, everything. They wanted to go with this because they ate good, they slept inside, they didn't sleep out in the ground.
Nice. So did they cook for you? Did you let them cook or no?
No.
No.
We ate our own food. Yeah. But we set up barber shops and anybody, yeah. And then the last one out of war is, well, it's over. It's over. They had declared down in Bad Aibling was the name of the town. It was a German airfield that we took over, and we took over the barracks and the officers' quarters. And I took off my duffel bag and took my clothes out and hung them up in his closet. I had a nice room to sleep in. And I figured, oh boy, this is nice. You go out on a terrace and you could see the snow-capped Alps, south of you. Beautiful. Figured, oh, this is going to be great. I was there about 4 days, and I'm called in and I'm transferred to the 558, which is going down, headed for Japan.
Oh.
But that was the lucky break because because of that I got home, I would say 6 months before, if I hadn't that hadn't happened. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then of course when I got home, we was fortunate it was early. Your grandmother and I were married when I was in the service,
Mm-hmm.
September the 5th, 1943. Mm-hmm.